More now on the crash of Germanwings Flight 9525 and a key question. Should doctors have had to report the co-pilot Andreas Lubitz's mental health state to the airline? Let me bring in doctor and columnist Dr. Sreedhar Potarazu in Washington. He just wrote a column about exactly this, and also criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool, who spent part of his career defending French Airbus. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Doctor, in this column that you just wrote, you write in part, quote, the relationship between mental illness and mass murder, whether by guns or terrorism or by airplane, is indisputable. And the time to take measures to prevent deaths caused by that relationship is long past due. So this brings up the key question. Right now, it is up to the pilots to self-report any mental illness, bout with depression, any medications they may be taking to treat it to the airline. Is self-reporting enough, doctor?
It's not enough, Poppy, and this raises a whole new issue between physicians, other professionals, and the patient, in a whole new domain of health privacy that's going to raise a lot of questions and concerns. Of course, as a doctor, we can only tell the patient what they're supposed to do or not to do. And then, as you said, it's going to be up to the patient in terms of making the determination whether they tell their employer. The doctor cannot tell the employer under privacy laws, and the employer is not allowed to reach out or understand at an individual level. It's still up to the patient in terms of reporting that.
But let me ask you this, doctor, and I don't want to interrupt, but I do want it to be clear for our viewers. I was reading through the HIPAA laws, right?
Yeah.
And deep into them, it says that covered entities, that would be doctors, may disclose protected health information that they believe is necessary to prevent or lessen a serious and imminent threat to a person or to the public.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because a covered entity there's a very fine line. An employer is technically a covered entity, but typically what employers do when they want to reach out directly to an employee, an employer can never know that an individual has a given illness, and they're not allowed to use that information under HIPAA to reach out to them directly. But what they can do, and they do, is to hire third parties, usually through the insurance companies, who are contracted to reach directly out to the individual. They know who the individual is, and they can engage in a conversation and a program to ensure that that patient is getting what they're supposed to and a direct follow-up. And that could be, a condition like diabetes, or it could be a mental health issue.
So to you, Brian, does this, when you look at these HIPAA laws, this covered entity, does that include doctors? Meaning, are doctors completely prohibited from telling an employer, look, I wrote this note saying that this co-pilot was unfit to fly? Or does this sort of part of the HIPAA laws allow the doctors, when they think they could be a risk to the public, allow the doctors to tell the employer?
Poppy, the key in the law that you just read is the word may. You said the doctors may report it. We need a change in the HIPAA laws, and worldwide we need changes that say the doctors must report, the key word must, and make them a mandated reporter, that if they suspect, especially with a pilot, if they suspect a pilot has a medical condition that impairs his or her ability to fly a plane, or a mental health disorder that compromises his or her ability to fly a plane, then they must report that to the employer and, if need be, law enforcement. And if they don't, there are consequences, which means criminal prosecution for failing to report. The only way to stop this from happening again is if everybody has skin in the game, that medical health personnel have skin in the game, therapists have skin in the game, and that there are consequences. Public safety trumps privacy.
Doctor, do you agree with that? Would you be on board with a change like that?
I completely agree. I think that physicians have a new responsibility, but it's a fine line, because you'll ask many physicians today, and I'll tell you, as a practicing physician, most people don't often put into context what it is and the patient's situation outside of taking care of the condition. And it doesn't matter whether you're a bus driver, an Uber taxi driver, or whether you're a pilot. Every single day, every one of us puts our lives in the hands of somebody who, we take it for granted, has the wherewithal in terms of maintaining the sanctity of that relationship and not putting our lives at risk. And we just take that for granted. But there are any number of things that we don't necessarily assess as physicians to know whether the functional status of that individual and their medical condition are adept enough and satisfactory enough for them to perform that. You know, you mentioned the blurred vision earlier. You know, I'm an ophthalmologist, and that's, you know, it's a good point. But even if you were to measure that his vision is not adequate, I think the attorney raises a good point that how are you going to enforce it? Because it's still left to an individual whose functional state is still at question.
I want to get Brian in here. Final word.
Yeah. Sure. Poppy, look, the reality is this. Lubitz was unfit to be a co-pilot based on the ejection he got that Dr. Gupta mentioned in 2010. He should have never been a pilot. So if we have new laws in place that mandate that that medical doctor that gave him that shot immediately reports that to Lufthansa, then I guarantee you he would not have been flying that plane.
We do have to wrap it up, but I got to say, as I leave it there, here's the fear that if you do that, right, many of these pilots, it is believed, or people would not then go to get the treatment that they need for fear of losing their job. That is what you run up against. What the answer is, I'm not sure. Gentlemen, we got to go. I got to leave it there. Thank you for being with me, both of you, Doctor and Brian. Appreciate it very much.